Forged and Risen Podcast, Episode 5, Raise Your Standards or Lower Your Expectations. Chapter 1, The Lie You've Been Living With. Good morning or good evening whenever you're listening to this. Welcome back to the Forged and Risen Podcast. This is where we don't chase motivation. We build discipline, identity, and execution one decision at a time. This is where we stop negotiating with weakness and start building standards that actually hold. And if you haven't yet, everything, the books, the podcast, the system, is at forgedandrisen.com. Let's get into it. There's a lie that almost everyone is living with, and what makes it dangerous is that it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels normal. It sounds right. It sounds like something you've probably said recently. I want more money, more freedom, more control, more discipline, more success, more out of life. And there's nothing wrong with that. You should want more. You weren't built to stay average. You weren't built to stay stuck. You weren't built to repeat the same patterns. But here's where it breaks. Most people want more, but they don't require more from themselves. They want better results, but keep the same habits. They want discipline. But only when it's convenient. They want consistency, but only when they feel like it. They want growth, but avoid the standards required to earn it. So what happens? Nothing changes. And that's the frustrating part, because it feels like you're trying. It feels like you care. It feels like you're putting in effort. But effort without standards doesn't create consistent results. So people fall into a loop. They start strong. They fall off. They restart. They lose momentum. They get frustrated. Then repeat it again. And over time, the questions get heavier. Why am I not where I want to be? Why do I keep starting over? Why can't I stay consistent? But those aren't the real questions. The real question is, what standard am I operating at? Because here's the truth. You don't get what you want. You get what your standards allow, not what you say, not what you plan, not what you hope for, what you do, what you tolerate, what you repeat daily. That is your standard. And your standard is either building your life or holding it exactly where it is. This is where it gets real. Because it's easy to talk about goals. It's easy to say you want more. It's easy to picture a better life. But it's different to look at your real day and ask, do my actions match what I say I want? That's the gap, not between where you are and where you want to be, but between your expectations and your execution. If you say you want discipline, but you hit snooze every morning, your standard isn't discipline. If you say you want more, but avoid hard things, your standard isn't growth. If you say you want control, but your habits are inconsistent, your standard isn't control. And this isn't judgment. This is clarity. Because once you see it clearly, you can't ignore it. Most people don't have a motivation problem. They have a standard problem. They've built a life around what they tolerate and expect something greater to come from it. That doesn't work. You cannot expect a high-level life while operating at a low level. You cannot expect discipline when you negotiate with yourself daily. You cannot expect consistency or when your actions depend on how you feel. And this is where people stay stuck, because they keep their expectations high, but their standards low. And when those don't match, you live in frustration. So let's simplify it. If you want more, you have to require more from yourself. If you want a different life, you have to operate at a different level. If you want results, you have to build standards that produce them. There's no shortcut around that. And here's the part most people avoid. You don't get to keep your current habits and expect a different outcome. You don't get to stay comfortable and expect growth. That's the lie, that somehow you can want more without becoming more. And once you see that clearly, everything shifts, because now you're left with a real decision. Raise your standards or lower your expectations. You don't get to keep both. Most people try to. That's why they stay stuck. But once you understand this, you stop negotiating and you start asking a better question. What do I require from myself every single day? That's where everything changes. Let's go deeper. Chapter 2, the audit you've been avoiding. Let's get real. You don't have a motivation problem. You don't have a time problem. You don't have a knowledge problem, you have an honesty problem. Because if you stripped away the excuses and looked at your life as it actually is, you would see exactly where things are breaking down, not in big failures, but in the small decisions you repeat every day. This is the audit you've been avoiding, and until you face it, nothing changes, because you can't raise your standards in areas you refuse to examine. So let's examine it. Start with your mornings. Do you wake up with intention, or do you wake up reacting? Hitting snooze, grabbing your phone, scrolling before you even get up, telling yourself you'll start in a few minutes. That's not just a habit, it's a standard. You've decided your day begins based on how you feel, not what needs to be done. And that standard carries into everything else. Now look at your work. When it's time to execute, how do you actually show up? Are you focused and disciplined, or distracted and drifting, checking your phone, avoiding the hard tasks, doing just enough to feel productive? That's not laziness, that's a lowered standard. Because when your standards are high, your actions follow. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't negotiate. You execute. Now look at your environment, your home, your workspace, the people around you. Is it aligned with where you're going, or filled with things you've learned to tolerate? Because your environment reflects your standards. And most people tolerate environments that quietly keep them average, not because they want to be average, but because they've accepted it. Now your health. How are you treating your body? Are you fueling it with intention, or feeding it whatever's easy? Are you moving consistently, or only when you feel like it? Are you prioritizing rest, or ignoring it? That's not about being busy. That's a standard. And then the hardest one, your promises to yourself, the goals you've set, the things you said you would do. How many have you broken? Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't follow through. Every time you break a promise to yourself and let it slide, you lower your internal standard. And that builds. It compounds until it becomes your identity. Someone who talks but doesn't execute. Someone who wants more but doesn't operate at that level. And here's the problem. Your expectations don't drop with your standards. You still want the results. You still expect the growth, but your actions don't match it. That's why you feel stuck, because you're expecting results from a version of you that you're not being. So let's fix that, not with motivation, with clarity. You need to see where your standards actually are, not where you think they are, but where your actions prove they are, because your standards are not what you say. They're what you tolerate, what you allow, what you repeat, what you accept is good enough. That's your real standard. And once you see that, everything changes, because now you have a choice. Lower your expectations or raise your standards, but you don't get to stay in the middle. That middle ground is where people stay stuck, talking, planning, waiting, all while their standards stay the same. This chapter is about eliminating that middle, because the life you want requires a different version of you, more disciplined, more focused, more intentional, and that version is built daily, non-negotiable. So ask yourself one question. What am I tolerating that doesn't align with the life I want? Be honest, because that answer is the gap, and that gap is closed one decision at a time. Every moment is a vote for your standards, for your identity, for your future. So ask yourself, are you voting for the life you want, or for the comfort you've been settling for? Because you don't accidentally build a high-standard life. You choose it, and that choice starts with the audit. No excuses, no avoiding it, just truth. Because once you see it, you either change or you stay exactly where you are. Chapter 3, the standard you enforce. Now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's what the audit does. Once you become aware of what you've been tolerating, how you've been showing up, where you've been cutting corners, you don't get to go back. You don't get to pretend you didn't notice. Now you know. And awareness creates responsibility, which means now you have a decision to make. Raise your standard or accept the life that comes from keeping them where they are. There is no middle anymore. So what does it actually mean to raise your standards? Not talk about it, not plan it, live it. Because raising your standards isn't a mindset, it's enforcement. It's deciding that certain things are no longer negotiable, that certain habits don't get a pass, that certain behaviors don't get justified anymore. It's drawing a line and holding it. That's where most people fail. They draw the line and then they move it. I'm waking up early until they're tired. I'm staying disciplined until it gets hard. I'm serious this time until it's inconvenient. That's not a standard, that's a preference. And preferences don't change your life. Standards do, because standards don't depend on how you feel. They don't shift with your mood. They don't disappear when things get uncomfortable. They stay the same, and you either meet them or you don't. So let's make this real. If your standard is waking up early, then that's the standard, not most days, not when you feel like it, every day. If your standard is executing at a high level, then that's the standard, not when you're motivated, not when it's easy, every time you show up. If your standard is taking care of your body, then that's the standard, not when you have time, consistently, because standards only work when they're enforced. And enforcement is where discipline lives. It's in the moments you don't feel like doing it, and you do it anyway, when it's inconvenient, and you still follow through, when nobody is watching, and you still hold the line. That's enforcement. And that's what builds identity. Every time you enforce your standard, you send yourself a message: this is who I am, not who you want to be, who you are. And that identity builds through repetition, through consistency, through doing it again and again, especially when it's uncomfortable, because comfort is what breaks standards. Comfort says just this once, like comfort says you can skip today. Comfort says you've done enough. And every time you listen to that voice, you lower your standard. So you have to decide, are you going to live by standards or by comfort? Because you can't have both. And here's where it becomes simple. Raising your standards isn't about adding more. It's about removing what no longer aligns. The excuses, the delays, the inconsistency. Cut it out. Because every time you allow it, you weaken your standard. And weak standards don't produce strong results. Clear standards do. Simple, direct, non-negotiable. And here's what most people miss. Raising your standards doesn't happen in big moments. It happens in small ones. When the alarm goes off, when the work gets hard, when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated, that's where your life is built. Those moments stack. They shape your identity. They determine your direction. And once you start enforcing your standards consistently, something shifts. You start trusting yourself again. You start believing your own word. You move differently, more focused, more intentional, more disciplined. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped negotiating, because you stopped lowering the bar, because you decided your standards actually mean something. So now ask yourself, what am I no longer willing to tolerate? Not tomorrow. Right now, what are you done excusing? What are you done allowing? Because that answer becomes your standard. And that standard only matters if you enforce it. Every day, in every moment, especially when it's hard, because that's what separates people who change from people who stay the same. It's not motivation, it's enforcement. It's holding the line when it would be easier not to, so draw it. And this time, don't move it, because the life you want is on the other side of that line, and the only thing standing between you and that life is the standard you're willing to enforce. Chapter 4, The Life Your Standards Create. This is where everything comes together. You've done the audit. You've seen the truth. You've drawn the line. Now comes the part most people never reach, living it. Because at the end of the day, your life is not built by your goals. It's not built by what you say you want. It's not built by what you plan to do. It's not built by what you hope will happen. Your life is built by your standards. What you allow, what you tolerate, what you enforce, that's it. And whether you realize it or not, you already have standards. They're just not producing the life you want, because your current results are a direct reflection of your current standards. Nothing more, nothing less. So if you want a different life, you don't need a new plan. You need a higher standard, because when your standards change, everything changes. The way you wake up changes. The way you show up to work changes. The way you treat your body changes. The way you handle pressure, stress, and adversity changes. You stop negotiating. You stop delaying. You stop waiting for the right moment, and you start executing. Not when it's convenient, consistently. That's where the real shift happens, and it's not loud, it's not flashy, it's quiet. It's built in the small moments no one sees. when the alarm goes off and you get up anyway, when the work gets hard and you lean in instead of pulling back, when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated and you still follow through. Those moments matter because those moments stack, they build momentum, they reinforce identity, and over time, they create a completely different life. Because high standards don't just change what you do. They change who you are. You become someone who follows through, someone who keeps their word, someone who does what needs to be done regardless of how they feel. And that version of you doesn't chase results. They attract them because their standards demand it. But here's the truth. Most people don't want to accept. This doesn't end. There is no finish line. There's no point where you arrive and say, I made it. I can relax now. Because the moment you stop enforcing your standards, you start slipping slowly, quietly, one skip day, one excuse, one moment of it doesn't matter. And that's how people lose everything they built. Not all at once, but one lowered standard at a time. So this isn't about a temporary push. This is about a permanent decision, a decision to live at a higher level, a decision to stop negotiating with yourself, a decision to become someone who holds the line no matter what. Because the life you want is not something you hope for. It's something you build daily through standards, through discipline, through execution. And here's what you need to lock in. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems, and your standards are the foundation of those systems. So if your standards are low, your systems are weak. And weak systems will always produce inconsistent results. But when your standards are strong, everything starts to align. Your habits become sharper, your focus becomes clearer, your actions become intentional, and your results start to reflect it, not because you got lucky, but because you became someone who operates differently. That's the shift, that's the separation. That's how you go from wanting more to actually building more. So now it comes down to one final decision. Are you going to continue living at the level you've been operating at? Or are you going to raise your standards and step into the life you say you want? Because you already know what needs to change. You've seen it. You've felt it. You've been avoiding it. But now you can't unsee it. So the choice is simple, not easy, but simple. Raise your standard or lower your expectations. And if you're serious about building a different life, this is where it starts. Right here, right now. No more waiting. No more excuses. No more negotiating. Just action. Just execution. Just standards. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to actually build the discipline, structure, and identity to live this out, go to forgedandrisen.com. That's where everything is. The books that break this down step by step. The full Forged and Risen podcast episodes. The daily Forged and Risen Gold. Resets to keep you locked in and consistent. Everything you need to not just hear this message, but apply it. Because this is not about information, it's about transformation. So take this chapter and use it. Apply it today. Raise the standard, hold the line, become the person your goals require, and build the life that comes with it. I'll see you in the next one.